The weary traveler draws close to the end of the path.
We have never had it so good.
All of this just works.
We are selling tea to China.
You did not have to redeem this, ma'am!
Out with them, forget about them.
Your broadcast is very biased. You've written a lot of ridiculous articles, so I would encourage you to be more journalistic and have more integrity.
Socialism is when the government does stuff.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist, or at least it would have been if I weren't sick last week. I'm sorry I forgot to send out that message. I was basically sleeping off the illness when we were supposed to have our episode last week, and by the time I sort of came to, too much time had passed for me to sort of put out any message on Twitter or on the community notes on YouTube for it to be useful. So, I just figured, well, it's a skip, and we'll be back this week again. With me, as always, I have my co-host, Luddic Path. I almost had a Freudian slip here right now. I almost called you Chuddick Path. Which
it's
I
very
feel would be like your,
yeah, thank you.
It's your like Wario, like Super Mario and Wario, you have Luddic Path, and then it's like Dark Luddic is Chuddick Path.
It's the no, I think as soon as I get big enough and I get monetized and the people from Star Sector come to collect, then you're going to see that name change. It's going to be Chuddick Path. I'll have to find the new avatar and the new gimmick. I'm just preparing people for that so you can adjust psychologically. But yeah,
Nice.
Welcome to the audience. Thanks to everybody for tuning in for some more content in the age of slop.
Yes.
I mean, it's there's so much stuff going on at the same time now that it's like if we miss 1 week, it's just total congestion of topics. I think it's a very good time to be a news pundit. On the other, I forgot to say, I like the new intro. I feel like it's getting better every time I see it. So kudos, I guess, to the.
Well, it's one of those things where I like it for different reasons than the previous one. They're sort of equal in my eyes, which I think is as good as I can aim for, right?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. They're both perfect in their own way. But yeah, we have
Cyber Ninja Zero says, "The Virgin, no, I have to inform my audience versus the Chad, they'll figure it out." Yes, I mean, if the stream isn't there, it's not like you guys think I'm gone forever, hopefully, right?
Well, I don't know. I was contacted by a couple of people actually, so I was surprised. I don't really think that much about the audience viewership or something. It's on your channel and you have the metrics, but yeah, some people have actually reached out. So it's
really?
it's cool to hear that people are actually tuning in for this stuff. Sometimes I just kind of forget about.
Well, I appreciate
I just
it.
forget
I'm
about
sorry.
the
I just
audience,
assumed that, I guess I assume
Never
we're
assume.
smaller than we are. Yeah. Not that we're that big anyway. So, well, there's so much to cover. Do we want to start with sort of a bit of a rapid fire, I guess, on some European news, some Norway news and some Europe news, and then we can look at maybe AI or USAID, things like that.
Yeah, first we'll do the Eurozone, and then we'll go across the pond.
Yeah, we'll start with the headline in Norway this week, which is that the government recently had a split. So the Farmers' Party, which was sharing governmental positions with Labour, essentially, decided to basically break out of the government. There's some things that the Labour government wanted in terms of accepting some regulations from the EU, according to energy, etc., that they simply couldn't abide. And there's some back and forth about whether or not this is basically just like a bit of a stunt ahead of the election this year to get sort of their base back on track, because they've been doing such a poor job the past 4 years while they've been in government on delivering their own sort of policy. Now, that being said, it opens the door for Labour to build what's called, I guess, a minority government, meaning that they can stay the rest of the period, which is this fall, 2025, as sort of the sole governing party. So they will fill all the ministry posts with their people. And, you know, from the edge of the arena with a steel chair out of nowhere comes former NATO leader Jens Stoltenberg and also former prime minister to become the Minister of Finance as like I have to assume, you know, a PR move, right?
Yeah, I think it was time. He has the good instincts to move back in again.
The king is back, baby.
Yeah.
I had a moment of that, like, I think I sent you like a gif of like the Joker saying like, do I have to do everything myself or something like that?
Yeah, I kept you waiting, huh? But I mean, at least my impression just looking at glossary. Oh yeah, I think he's on track. He's on track to get there.
He certainly has a lot of likenesses.
The resume is pretty impressive at this point. If you've been like the head of NATO and then Bilderberg the head, and then you're coming back to be Minister of Finance. I mean, at least I got the impression looking at like polls that actually the Labour Party had a surge just after this happened. I mean,
he is in a broad sense a respected politician. Some will criticize him for. Some things that happened when he was in government are the reasons for the problems we have today. But I mean, you could say the same about Blair, right? But he is remembered as when it comes to sort of the ruling, right? He is quite popular. When you talk to people about what they think about when he speaks, like they say that he waffles on about a lot of stuff, but he's also been a lot better ever since he went into NATO. He's sort of, I don't know, he's had a bit of a renaissance in being able to speak more clearly and have a bit of a sort of stronger line in his speaking, albeit, of course, depending on whether or not you agree with the line he's taking, because he's, I think he's a bit more idealistic than someone like Tony Blair. He seems to believe a bit more in the, the NATO sort of cooperative ambassador, we're all holding hands sort of project. But what's always driven him in every interview I've read about him, he said he's always been sort of like, yeah, I was idealistic when I was in Labour and I was like 18, and then I realized that, you know what, I have to just drop ideology. What's important to me is having a seat at the table. Like, when a decision is made, you have to be in the room. Nothing else matters. So there's some echoes of Blair in that.
Yeah, it's nice to have pragmatists, and of course I think people like him because the time when he was sitting in government was a good time for Norway economically, and probably a lot more carefree.
He's also educated as an economist, in contrast to a lot of other people who's been Minister of Finance for the last 10 years.
Just a refresher, when was he in government again? Let's see.
2003 to 2000.
Because he had it wasn't a continuous government either. I think he had 2 periods separated or something. Let's see here.
So now he's back, while Ludwig figures that out, he's back to become the Minister of Finance. Of course, it's a very temporary position because the government is only going to run for like half a year. But it's a big PR move. He's replacing someone who has no economics background, and we'll see if he can really do anything. That being said, I think what's interesting is what happens next, because this guy gave up the Bilderberg position and someplace else as well to come back into Norwegian politics. And I can't imagine he did that without thinking that maybe he's got a shot at the prime minister post in the next round, right? Like, I'm not talking this election, but maybe going forward, right?
Yeah, there has to be something there, right? If you're giving up those positions, that he thinks he can do more.
Considering how down and out Labour is in general, without getting too specific about Norwegian politics, they don't have very many good ruling candidates.
No,
and he's someone who could basically just steamroll everyone else.
Yeah, I think it's
internally.
That's generally true, and I actually think it's their strength to be a minority government in these last, in like the last 6-month period before the election, in that they can actually be able to do more things, and they just be able to just cut cleanly through with propositions and political solutions that they want. I mean, I've talked to some people like around the lunch table at my job who are really more, I guess, savvy on Norwegian politics, and there's sort of tend left Labour, socialist, whatever. Like the consensus opinion among those people is that like the alliance between the Farmers Party and the Labour Party is just a complete mismatch. It's like there's they look at sort of the Farmers Party as kind of a ball and chain for the Labour Party. That they just have no synergistic value whatsoever. And
interesting.
I think it's actually true, considering how political identities are developing. These two parties are becoming kind of the new diametrical opposite in terms of, okay, what's going to be the say the next 10 years, next 15 years, what's the inside and the outside, and the right and the left. Well, it's going to be populist, the emerging populist parties, and the kind of the remnants of the liberal technocratic parties. And that's what you have in the government now. You have kind of an emerging populist identity with the Farmers Party, and I'm seeing that. I mean, I had that article for last week, where they were doing an article about the youth wing of the Farmers Party and how they've gone just off the scale right wing in terms of, or at least in sort of the estimation of the newspaper, the way they look at it typically in Norwegian politics. Both in terms of energy policy, social justice, what do you call it, inclusionary policy, immigration, anti-globalist sentiment, or something. They're just like to the right of like everything from the older party, and that's kind of. I didn't know that, but there's a lot of people from that party who are really online who have like this sort of. They're taking this kind of pro-Trumpian, anti-EU line
from the Farmers Party.
The Farmers Party, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're losing, of course, a lot of that voting bloc to the Progress Party currently, but I think they're going to try to go even harder in the populist direction in the future to win those people back. And I mean, that is the emerging market in the West, the discontent, populists. I mean, we've talked about this many times, and you're seeing it sort of in full effect in the United States. And so, some people are looking on the horror, and other people are looking and say, I kind of want that, kind of.
Well, what I want to criticize with that, and I tried to start poking at some of the more libertarian right wing Norwegian Twitter guys, is sort of trying to figure out, well, do you want it? Because the context isn't the same. Like, Norway isn't America. So looking at what's happening in America and saying, I just want to do the same thing, isn't really going to work, in my view, at least. I mean, you can still do a lot of right-wing things, but it's not gonna be the same, right?
No, I mean, I find that to be quite fascinating in general, and it's. I talked about how weird I think the Norwegian kind of right-wing Bitcoinosphere is, but I mean, with the recent, ruckus around the tariffs and annexation of Canada, and the sort of like the friction that's been created between the United States and Canada, I realized that like the Canadian right is kind of the same way as the Norwegian one.
Okay.
I mean, I made
this
joke.
That mean?
I mean, I thought that the only thing that's more cucked than the Canadian left wing is essentially the Canadian right wing,
Oh, they want to be
and
annexed by America.
Yeah, essentially they're just like they're just begging to be annexed by America. Like, just please. And they're, now that the lefties are in Canada are picking up this kind of nationalist identity.
Yeah, I'm a Norwegian libertarian nationalist, but I want to build down everything that's sovereign about Norway and
just
ruin our society so that America can annex us.
So I can be the 53rd state or something. Essentially, like, talk about like patriotism and nationalism and stuff. And like, I know I just want to be annexed actually, and so I can be on the Doge team or something.
It gets very larpy.
It's not, but that's just kind of how it is, and especially like with this the new kind of Trump government, it's puts these people in such a weird position because before that they could sort of take this kind of nationalist posturing, right, and sit and say that I'm like the real hardcore nationalist, I'm the true patriot, and this and that. But now that they're sort of,
turns out I was the one that was an extreme right winger all along. Yeah. But it was me, Walrus, not you. Jesus.
But like with if that annexation stuff is being put on the table and they're just like throwing themselves at the floor to just give away land to another country, it's something else. It's not nationalism, at least. It's not patriotism. I don't know what you want to call it. It is a certain.
It's not nationalism. It's not patriotism. It's not even sort of like right wing in a hierarchical sense either, because a lot of these people are, again, as I said, like, are narco-libertarians, meaning that they literally don't want society, right? But they still want to somehow, I get the sense that they still want to keep elected democracy as part of, because they think that's kind of nice, right? Having democracy is kind of nice, but we also want to be libertarians. And I really, if there are any of the Norwegian sort of libertarians or the Bitcoinosphere or whatever listening to this that want to sort of pull out of a lot of institutions because you feel like what matters is sort of localism, what matters is, what's close to you, your family, your local community. The question you need to answer is, would you be okay with giving up elective democracy to achieve that? Right? Because that's very easy to do if you just have monarchy. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but just sort of thought experiment, right? It's very easy to have a high degree of freedom if you have an authoritarian state, right? You just need to have a good authoritarian state. But philosophically, you kind of have to sort of fit that square peg in a round hole, and that just doesn't work for me. I don't understand it, how you can pull out of society but also enjoy the fruits of societal labor at the same time.
Well, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of contradictions going on there. But I mean, I posted about this on X previously, where I had this sort of light bulb moment as to trying to figure out this kind of Rubik's Cube of exactly what the populist people want, because usually you get a lot of complaints, but there's not a lot of articulated visions of what they're actually after. But I think what they really want is kind of a simpler world. In a sense, they just want things to be simple, not easy, not affordable, but just like less bureaucracy, right? I want less supply chains. I want less genders. I want less of pretty much less of government. Yeah, so it's and in that sense, the authoritarianism comes in, because it's like the monarchy or the dictatorship is kind of the simplest solution. Is you just have one guy who just dictates, and that's that. It's pretty easy to understand. So they don't have to sit and try to wrap their heads around like global supply chains or global financial systems or
well, my take is that they have no my take would be that philosophically maybe they don't have really any standing to make that decision, right? Maybe it would be better if someone made it for them.
Yeah, but that's just kind of because that's when you're, the point that I was making is that you're seeing this is like vague grouping that's forming now, right? Because Trump was in Davos, right? Or he wasn't in Davos. He showed up on like a Zoom or something. But
he talked at WEF. Yeah.
He was there, and Milei was there later, and Milei had a speech where he said that I'm in this alliance, right? Where the alliance, the people he named were Bukele, right? He named Trump, Meloni, Orban, and Netanyahu. right?
Okay.
And you're asking yourself,
BB,
sort of, like,
of course.
yeah, and BB, yeah. But the question is, like, what do these people even have in common, right? Because it's like,
They
on
all
one
love
hand, you have
Israel.
the-
That's what they have in common.
yeah, of course. Aside from the tiny hat stuff, aside from like the dreidel, there is a kind of style to their politics, and it's not really in the substance as much as what exactly. as to
Bill Wilson, as always, with the timely comments. Yeah.
like what exactly, the substance and the philosophy behind the politics, but it's sort of the simplicity of the message, and it's the simplicity of the solution before the actual consistency of the solution, if that makes sense. Like
because it's a lot easier to say, because someone said we're gonna do Y, right? It's a lot easier to say we're gonna not do Y, because that's very simple, right?
Yeah.
But what's hard is to say, actually, we're not gonna do Y, we're gonna do X, right? That's hard. To find what's actually worth doing, right?
Yeah, but the point, just to finish it, is that, let's say, the vision of Bukele, like his entire shtick was that mass arrest of the narcotics gangs in El Salvador, right? So, what's the solution? You just put him in jail. Just put him in jail, dummy. It's not that hard. We just put all of them in jail. We just have like they just have them lined up, and like, and the Milei solution is just like the Afuera stuff, where he's just like pulling off these papers from the wall. Just, okay, we'll just dismantle every department, cut everything in government spending. It's like it is like one focused vision. We're cutting. We're just gonna we're throwing them all out. We have had enough of the nuance and the kind of dealing in the complexity and sort of like weighing things up against each other. We're just going to do this.
People are saying it worked, though. This is probably with... Oh, sorry, it's like auto-playing some video now.
Yeah, I think we should probably do a video. But I mean, there is this trend on Twitter with like rightoid content, where like these rightoids make memes about studies where they haven't really understood what the studies actually said, or they post statistics and they sort of like read out the exact opposite of what it is. I don't have it here, but it was one of these Elon simp accounts that were posting about Bukele, essentially. And I mean, I encourage people to actually look at the homicide rate, per capita in El Salvador, which was really decreasing. It was sort of halving every 2 years, even when Bukele came into office. So he did his mass arrest in 2022, right? And at that point, they had sort of halved the homicide rate 2 times already by the former president. So they were already sort of on track with the sort of, I mean, they had a much sort of harder line program to dealing with these people. But it looks to me like Bukele is sort of more of a guy who showed up to take credit for stuff that was already going on and sort of turn himself into this kind of meme.
Bill Wilson says, when you do things, stuff happens. Well, I mean, in our intro, we have the Richard Wolff quote of socialism is when the government does stuff. So
that's evergreen. I mean, yeah, the guy is super gay, but that quote is just absolutely golden. Socialism.
I mean, there's a bit more to it. I think he says, and the more stuff the government does, the more socialism it is, or something. Yeah. As you said, he's kind of silly, but I mean that one is just funny.
But I think it does capture.
I lost audio here for a second.
Certain sentiment, and I mean with Milei, it's sort of his stuff is also working, but you have to consider the fact that like the previous sort of Peronist government was just absolute dog shit. Like it was just completely terrible. Where it's like you have to consider that pretty much anything would be better than what they were doing. I don't really even want to throw shade at Milei. I think he's very interesting character. I'm just trying to make a commentary on the I think the general style of what people like about
that's the quote. And when he does a whole lot of stuff, it's communism. He says communism. He says it like that.
He's absolutely perfect.
All right. Let's move on to the mealworms.
Oh yes.
Why don't we? So, an EU commission has authorized... I'm taking this from a website called foodcomplianceinternational.com because I looked into a bit of the directive itself. It gets very dry very quickly. This is a bit of a summary that I felt like I could trust, right? It was just sort of the raw information. Commission authorizes ultraviolet treated powder of whole mealworm larvae as novel food. With the implementation of Regulation 2025-89 of 20th January 2025, the Commission authorizing the placing on the market of UV-treated powder of whole Tenebrio molitor larvae, also known as yellow mealworm, as novel food and amending implementing Regulation 2017-2470. I believe this one is the one that says that like you can actually sell bugs. You know, you can buy bugs at as snacks, right? I think this is the one that authorizes that. On March 2023, the authority adopted its scientific opinion on the safety of UV-treated powder of whole yellow mealworm as a novel food pursuant to regulation blah blah blah. In its scientific opinion, the authority concluded that UV-treated powder of monitor larva is safe under the proposed conditions to use and at the proposed use levels. So that means that UV-treated powder of whole monitor larva, when used in bread and rolls, cakes, pasta-made products, processed potato products, cheese and cheese products, fruit and vegetable compotes intended for general population, fulfills the conditions in placing on the market in accordance with Article blah blah blah. So essentially, you know, there's going to be some mealworms in the flour, is what it's saying. Now, of course, I mean, if you're unlucky, you can still get, you know, today you can get mealworms in the flour, and it's a bitch to get rid of. If you're unlucky and get like a bad batch, and you have to like clean out like an entire cupboard to get rid of them. That happened to me one time. But what this is, I assume, it's hard because what's going around is a lot of the, you know, eats the bugs. They're going to put a lot of worms in your food. But I think Leo Borealis commented on this. This might just be like managed decline, that like there are you know, grain storage infrastructure is declining, so they're essentially just moving the goalposts for what's the accepted level of like ground up worms that are already in the flour and wheat. But I'm not quite sure.
I mean,
it's still kind of icky, and I don't like it.
You leave the worms in there. I mean, I understood it as like they UV, you know, they treat it or whatever, and you could farm these worms and you ground them into powder, and you could use that powder in food. So it's like,
well, I think that's where people are a bit confused, and I'm a bit confused as well, because it's not, the regulation itself, as far as I can tell, isn't specific about this. It just says you are allowed to have this, you know, percentage amount of ground up mealworm in your flour if you UV treat it, right? It doesn't say that, oh, you're going to have to add it, as far as I understand, or it doesn't say that, that, oh, we can't remove it, right? It just says you're allowed to have this much, and where it comes from, it doesn't really care about? Question mark. I'm not quite sure on that. But that's how
I'm not even sure what
understanding it.
UV treating means. If there's any food experts in the chat, maybe they could enlighten us on this. But so you think this is like there's going to be some mealworms in the grain, and that's going to be ground up with the grain, and then
I think many places in the world there are mealworms in the grain already, right, to a certain extent, and there are regulations in place to keep the grain stored in a way that prevents that from happening, right? But I mean, I think this to me this seems like just a loosening of the standards.
Yeah,
but the idea of UV light, yeah, I mean, someone's saying in the chat, I mean, it is a sanitary act. I don't know like the science behind it, but I heard about it before.
Like,
in other...
if you're eating shrimp salad or some like this kind of fish stuff, it may contain pieces of bone or something that they'll put on the pack. You know, it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
That okay, we can't guarantee that it doesn't. You know, we didn't ground up some mealworm in this.
When we ground the flour, we might have ground a lot of mealworm at the same time because we suck at keeping it. You know,
we're just going to roll it out. Yeah.
Of course, this could be a double-edged sword, sort of, or I guess a double, you know, a 1-2 punch, where they allow sort of the decline portion of it, but they also open up for the possibility of sort of adding it as a, let's put it like as a green policy or something. Like now you can actually put you can water, you can put sawdust in the bread, as it were. You can put mealworm in the flour, right?
Well, I don't know if, like, if you farm mealworms or something, if you have it and you turn it into a powder or something, if it's
Big day for the
nutritionally-
mealworm farmer. Yeah.
Usually you don't want to think too much about where your food comes from, but if it's treated properly, I assume at least it's digestible.
Ad nauseum has said they have banned strong pesticides and insecticides. This is just controlled decline.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
that's sort of what I'm getting at. Is it's still not good. It's not any better than it being done as like a additive, right? It's just as bad. I'm just saying. I think the reason is twofold at least.
Yeah, but of course we're having the nuanced discussion here. But you know what the kind of like slop accounts are going to do is like they post a photo.
You will eat the bugs and
eating like a maggot-filled sandwich or something. And they blame the EU for this as usual. But I mean, this is all. The problem is that these critiques are always kind of double-edged, because they'll, on one hand, they complain about the EU for being too regulated, right? There's kind of like this bureaucratic mess. It's way too much regulation. You can't have innovation. The prices are too high. And then, okay, they do stuff like this, which is like, okay, they loosen regulation. But then, you can't do that, because we don't want you to loosen regulation. We don't want to have.
Well, we're back to I want libertarianism, but I would also like elective democracy, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the food discussion as well, because it's with all these tariffs discussion that I think people have forgotten about already. That Trump was doing last week. He was talking about tariffing the EU and why he doesn't like the EU, because they're treating us badly and they're not taking our food and they're not taking our cars. But I mean, there's a reason that the EU isn't taking American food, because it's so deregulated. This kind of like GMO slop that they're eating. It doesn't it's not good enough to pass for EU food regulation. And that's part of the reason they're not taking it. But of course, if they loosen the regulation, then you could get cheaper food. If you took you bought from American farms and you accepted their food standard, you could get it cheaper. It would be lower quality as well. But I feel like it's like, from the people pushing this slop, it's always like this kind of lose-lose situation where it's okay. Yeah, it's overregulated, but they still get mad when you try to loosen the regulation to make more stuff possible. So it's got. Yeah, I mean, I've said what I think about a lot of these people already, but I'm just pointing it out how it's kind of like they're just never happy, no matter which direction it goes.
I understand, but I see this one, as a bad thing. I mean, on both sides here. I don't see this as a good thing. I don't want mealworms in my flour in any shape or form, and we should do better, right? Hopefully, this one does not get sent to Norway, because it's at times optional which ones you have to comply with when you're part of the EEA. And we can sort of at times pick and choose. And we already have quite strict food regulation here in Norway. It's one of the things that that I greatly enjoy.
I do appreciate it myself, yeah.
Let's see here. I think next up, do we want to do AI first, or did you want to look at USAID?
I think AI is probably at least chronologically, it makes the most sense to do the earliest part first. And this is something we wanted to talk about last week when AI was like a hot topic. So it shifts quickly, this stuff.
It does very quickly.
I mean, so what happened? There's, with the new Trump government, there was an initiative that's been introduced, which is it's not really a government initiative either. I think that was confusing for a lot of people. This is like the Stargate program. It's like this $1 billion program by SoftBank and Larry Ellison from Oracle and Sam Altman from OpenAI that was invited to the White House, and they would stand by Trump and sort of introduce, so we're going to invest in all these server parks and all this energy, so we're going to have like the best AI program in the world. And there was a lot of talk about the AI arms race. Like that's the new meme going around, is that we have to beat China in AI because, well, I think that's the kind of the problem here with this kind of AI stuff, is that it's so obscure. I feel like it's so opaque.
It's nebulous what it actually is.
What are you going to use this for? Because the Larry Ellison was talking about, okay, we're going to have custom-made mRNA vaccine for every American person when we scan all your medical records with the AI, but it's going to take so much energy. Like it sounded like absolute insanity. And Ellison is sort of known for being this he's more of a salesman who will just come out and promise everything. That I doubt they have anything ready for that. He was just sitting riffing off whatever he thinks is possible in his head with this kind of stuff. And so it's, but it's, yeah, I think there's a lot of, because it's presented by Trump, the base accepts it. In a sense, I think if you had Biden's up there with like Bill Gates talking about giving custom mRNA vaccines to all,
the worst thing is probably going to be Bill Gates anyway. Right.
Yeah.
Because
he
was when Trump was inaugurated, he was excited to work with Trump, right? So it's probably going to be Microsoft and Bill Gates anyway. In the back.
Yeah, he'll do it when he's finished sterilizing Africa. He'll, come around and buy up the rest of the farmland, and he'll still sterilize.
The potential for AI is very good, but what a lot of people interact with when they interact with AI today is the large language models, which is DeepSeek and ChatGPT, etc. And those are very specific tools that are very good at very specific things, and they're incredibly expensive to maintain and incredibly expensive to run, and require a ridiculous amount of computing power. And you asked, I think on Twitter, was it like, how has your life been impacted by AI, right? And calling it AI in that sense is a misnomer, because how has your life been impacted by large language models? For a lot of people, they haven't really been impacted directly by large language models. These things will impact the back end of businesses at best. They're very good at dealing with, obviously, language, things that have with like coding, etc., right? But you still can't trust them. I mean, I interact with them probably every day because there's tools built for programmers now where you can use that to sort of like auto-generate snippets of code, etc., right? But you always have to double check because it goes retarded sometimes, right? And you can use it to what's called like rubber duck if you want to talk about like a solution you've built. And usually I end up figuring out something smarter than the AI, but just having someone to bounce ideas off of is nice. But this is all sort of like back end stuff that ends up, my B2B software as a service can be delivered, a week faster. We done it, guys. Considering the power cost, I think in the tweet that I responded to you, opening something like ChatGPT to the masses, aside from, of course, marketing and just the data basis that you generate by doing it, it's kind of like giving everyone like a CCN machine in their backyard, and like 70% of us don't know how to use it. 5% of us know how to use it, and the rest of us figured out how to like draw memes on metal sheets, and everyone's like drawing 5 times more power than they used to. And until you have an increase in effectiveness or an increase in approach, what's interesting on the horizon is what's called the retrieval augmented generation, which reduces a lot of the cost of running these things, because you don't have to regenerate learning models. You can keep the same model running quote unquote locally in a business, even on-prem, and rather use data to alter the result of a request against it. I'm getting more technical here. Or you'll have advances like DeepSeek. If DeepSeek is to be trusted, I'm never really sure what to trust when it comes to China. You'll have advances where like, oh yeah, we can do it with like 1/10 of the GPU power, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dig into here. Do you want to just look at the Mark Andreessen article I posted in the media channel?
Sure.
Maybe we could use that.
Is that the Amazon? No, it's the Yahoo Finance. Yeah.
A lot of finance-related stuff.
Yeah.
When you're getting into AI and tariffs and stuff, it's inevitable.
Do I wear programmer socks? No. I do not wear programmer socks. Wages will crash, but so will prices, says leading AI investor Mark Andreessen on AI's role in ushering a productivity-fueled consumer boom.
Because I feel like at least now we have some hook to grab onto here. But Mark Andreessen is a part of the the tech oligarchy. I don't know, what is he rich from again? Isn't it like the Opera browser or something, or the I don't remember exactly. It's one of these browsers that he made.
This is the Egghead, isn't it?
Yeah. This is Eggman.
Yeah, I think is he Netscape or something?
Maybe,
I think it's Netscape. Yeah.
So, but
he's got a wonderful.
Like a big,
Google Mark Andreessen. He looks like a DreamWorks character.
Yeah, there's something grotesque and cool about his look. He looks like a sort of Rembrandt painting almost. When you kind of look at him, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
but he's on Twitter and he's a part of the tech oligarchy. That's almost like the de facto government now, and you can just read the article to see kind of like what's his view about where this AI stuff is going before we move on with the discussion.
Mark Andreessen, major tech investor and co-founder of venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, believes that AI will drastically reshape the economy by crashing wages while also driving down the cost of goods and services. The promise of a consumer utopia. In a recent tweet, Andreessen claimed that the fall in human wages due to AI is not only logical but necessary. A world in which human wages crash from AI, logically, necessarily, is a world in which productivity growth goes through the roof and prices for goods and services crash to near zero, he wrote. Consumer cornucopia. Everything you need, everything you want for pennies. Now, I think what he's targeting here, I mean, there is a lot of what's called, popularly called email jobs, where it's like, people who are just sort of facilitating things that could be done by language models. And I guess the thought is that the savings here are going to, reflect on the price of the final product, I suppose.
Well, I mean, this is utopianism, right? Because there's a lot of talk about obsolescence and the people are just being displaced by it. And okay, who's actually been displaced by large language models? I have a little list here. Let's say like people who are digital illustrators, for example. Now that you can make AI slop images for your business or your meme site or something, you're not going to pay someone to design in Photoshop. Well, at least that market.
Well, you might still, though. Shrunk. I mean, because once it becomes good, right? Because
if you need something very specific, yes, you still need the specialists. But if you just need some general kind of like business front end, custom made business stuff, like previously you'd have to look at these sort of royalty free websites and get these kind of silly images or what do they call these?
Highly specific stock photos.
Stock photos, right? That's an example. Like old businesses, you need stock photos, and now you can just AI generate stuff and keep it for yourself. And there's no, well, I mean, there is a problem there with the people, the data you use to train the model, but they haven't figured that out yet. So as long as you pay for the AI, you can get as much slop for your website as you want. So the people who were making that stuff are probably going to be out of a job. So the second would be like support workers. A certain segment of them, but now that you have these AI support bots, like when you go to your electronic bank or something, or you ask a question, they will always have like a chat bot there that you can ask, and that offloads a lot of support. But that doesn't, I mean, some of those jobs were previously done by like Indian call centers and stuff. So the call center economy has taken a hit.
Sure.
Second would be like, let's say like administrative secretary roles, like data entry people, or people who create these sort of templates, paralegal people, stuff like that. They have taken a hit. People who are copywriters, like if people who are just sort of, you need to write, specific greetings or business, what ad text, for example, because that stuff you can just generate by, by the second with this language model. Translators,
a lot of people who work with like data retrieval, or like I'm thinking about people who getting specific again, but if you have like someone in your company needs some internal data, what you do is like you set up like a Power BI thing, right? And you have some guy come in to sort of clean up the data or pull it out of the database. But if you have an AI model running with the context of your company's data on it, you can basically just have a literal, like, your interface to the company in terms of like the company data is just a chat. So you can be like, yeah, I want all sales from October to November in this region. And you don't have to go to like a Power BI developer and wait 5 months. You just get it instantly.
Yep. So there's some like sort of IT, lower level IT that's out, and the last is voice actors, which is sort of blown out, right? Because you can get these. What is that service that you recommended me that everybody's using for the voice stuff now? The
11 Labs.
11 Labs, yeah. So everybody's generating this. When you're getting ads now, everybody's using 11 Labs and AI generated slop videos. So I think those are the videos that are the jobs that are currently being hurt by AI. But it's nothing like the stuff that he's saying here, like the price to everything is just going to plummet to zero. I mean, it's pure utopianism, and depending on who you're talking to with this AI stuff, they all have their own kind of like alternate reality version of what this AI is going to lead to. Either it's got like the consumer cornucopia, the Ray Kurzweil, singularity, or it's going to be like this kind of Roko's basilisk. I have no mouth and I must scream future where the AI is torturing everybody, and it's all based on just pure speculation. Really, there's very little actual empirical data to explain how actually is AI impacting people, and a lot of just dude weed Lamau, I watch Blade Runner stuff that you're getting, and even from people who are as high up as Andreessen here, I mean, I'm surprised that like this is kind of what passes for thinking in those circles, but here we are. I mean, with Elon and him and a lot of that, the podcast circuit bros, this is how they think. So, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah. We'll just read through it.
No, I understand. I'm just I'm just running through. You said I have no mouth and I must scream, which makes me always run through the entire like am quote. Isn't it the opening statement? The like, let me tell you how much I've come to hate you all since I began to live. He says like if every nanoangstrom, whatever. Yeah, hate. Yes, that like, if every nanoangstrom of my circuits, etc., etc. All right. As Futurism reports, this follows a well-worn Silicon Valley belief that technological progress inevitably results in widespread prosperity. The idea is that because that happened for like Fedora and Uber and everything you guys have been doing for the past 15 years, right? The idea is that as AI boosts productivity to unprecedented levels, prices will plummet, making life more affordable even if people are earning far less. However, this assumes that people will still have enough income to participate in this supposed economic utopia. The ruthless logic of Silicon Valley. Andreessen's vision highlights how many tech leaders see the future. Temporary economic struggles are just part of progress. However, his comments also suggest that these investors care more about changing things quickly but about workers losing their jobs. For instance, while some AI proponents advocate for universal basic income as a safety net for displaced workers, Andreessen is staunchly against it, comparing it in his infamous, quote, the techno-optimist manifesto to turning people into zoo animals. Instead of offering solutions to mitigate AI's impact, he appears to view the collapse of traditional jobs as an unavoidable consequence of progress. Let's see here. Story continues. Andreessen's rhetoric isn't an isolated case. Elon Musk shares a similar philosophy and commented in November that his Doge Commission's work would necessarily involve some temporary hardship. Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison supports AI being used for government surveillance, saying it will make sure citizens will be on their best. This is literally Minority Report. Andreessen has also expressed deep suspicion toward the workers inside his companies. In a recent interview with NIT's Rose Do that. That's an interesting name. He claimed that elite institutions are producing, quote, America-hating communists who infiltrate his firms and actively work to destroy them from the inside. He views these people as professional activists who undermine companies rather than help them, strengthening his argument for using AI to replace human labor. Honestly, I can dig it. That's kind of based. Andreessen and other Silicon Valley elites continue to push the narrative that AI's disruptive potential is an unavoidable step toward a better future. However, a big part of their worldview is predicated on the idea that people would adapt and that new opportunities will inevitably arise due to technological advancement. For many workers, though, the promise of cheaper goods and services means little if they no longer have a steady income. The AI revolution may drive economic efficiency, but whether it results in a society that benefits everyone remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, because he has no actual explanation for how you get to that point where everything is so cheap that you can just buy whatever you want for pennies. Or there's a lot of steps before you get there, right? And it also assumes.
I mean,
that
yeah, you got to spend a lot of time and energy, sort of like to reach, because this is what they're talking about. Like it's like when you're if you're like a spaceship, right, and you're going to the moon. And the way you go to the moon is that you basically hook yourself up to the Earth's gravitational field, and then you calculate using big maths. You calculate the point at which you should sort of use your thrusters to escape. You got to reach escape velocity from Earth's gravitational field, right? In order to slingshot yourself to the moon. So, and in a sense, this is what they're talking about. They want to sort of reach this point where we can sort of slingshot ourselves out of I guess civilizational reality of entropy and thermodynamics, right? And go into like the post, the meta-human, I guess, post-scarcity society. And as you said, there's a lot of steps between now and then.
Yes, and the problem is also with ownership, right? Because if you're going to get anything out of these, consumer cornucopia stuff, you need to actually have some income yourself. And if you have an economy that favors capital over labor, as it does, particularly in the United States, then, well, it's really sweet for a guy like Andreessen who owns the AI, but not so sweet if you're like a regular Joe who is being displaced by it. So it will, of course, favor the people who own the capital. And I mean, it's probably nice for like Andreessen and Elon and Ellison and these types, because like they can replace their underlings with more and more AI and just get more direct control.
Is someone like Andreessen like a big anti-immigration guy? Because that should track, right? If you're big on like replacing workers with AI, you should be very anti-immigration as well, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they are trying to get immigrants in because they can get more AI specialists from around the world, right? That was the H-1B visa thing that Elon particularly wanted AI specialists, right? He needs the Indians to operate the AI for him so he can displace other what do you call them, like Native Americans. They're using that term now, but I mean, I just think about like the jeans and feathered, Indian American types when I say that. But like, I mean, in my own view, when I think about this stuff, I'm almost like taking a kind of like AI communism view on this, because I'm kind of thinking that wouldn't it be better to, like, if we could replace Andreessen and Ellison and Musk with AI and then just have the workers like just stay, I mean, when you're seeing all of this stupid shit that's coming out of these people's mouths, like Andreessen, all this kind of, can't you just AI generate this? I mean, when I'm looking at like, Trump's Truth Social feed or something, it looks AI generated, to be honest. Like you could have some AI just generate this nonsense and try to just figure out something that would work for people, instead of just, okay, like these eccentric billionaires are going to have more and more of this AI that they can just use to displace people. And okay, what are they going to do? Who cares? They suck it. If you're not the lithium and capital. I mean, I know it sounds extremely socialist, but I don't like where these people are coming from. I don't. Well, like, they just want to tailor the economy so that they can reach some kind of escape velocity and not.
It's very spreadsheet thinking, and I don't like it. Nordan says, feeling myself become more anti-capitalist every day. Soon I'll probably be on my Nazbol arc. And as far as I remember, you're a Zoomer, Nordanon, which means that you're probably overdue for a radical ideology shift. You probably should have done that like a year ago, right?
Honey, it's 4:00. It's time for your ideology
time to radically shift your ideology. So that's how it goes. Do we want to look at the DeepSeek thing?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you could look at that article as well, because that's one of the things. I mean, one of the aspects of this. Okay, the AI is going to bring about the utopia, and there's a part of this kind of wishful thinking there, but there's also a cynical economical side when people like Andreessen and Ellison are promising the world with this AI, because there are many people who speculate that it's this is a bubble, right? AI can't really deliver this stuff. This is like the .com bubble, or the housing bubble or something. People just keep pushing more and more into this AI stuff that they think, they're just going to solve every problem, and you want more and more investment into it. But at some point, they're going to figure out that, well, actually, it it can't deliver these things, and the bubble is going to burst. Somebody's going to be left holding the bag, essentially. But in the meantime, they're just going to keep making up these kind of singularity stories to keep cash flowing into them. But this is where we get the innovation, quote unquote, or hybrid warfare, or whatever you want, from China, who released this DeepSeek model that is sort of a rival to ChatGPT, and these kind of generative AI, which it basically does the same things ChatGPT does at like a fraction of the cost, energy-wise. Maybe
China's DeepSeek sparks AI market rout. Technology shares around the world slid on Monday as the surge in popularity of Chinese discount artificial intelligence model shook investors' faith in the AI sector's voracious demand for high-tech chips. Startup DeepSeek has rolled out a free assistant it says uses lower-cost chips and less data, seemingly challenging a widespread bet in financial markets that AI will drive demand along a supply chain from chip makers to data centers. The market reaction: Nasdaq down 3.1%, S&P 500 fell 1.85%, Nvidia down 16%. Oh no, my hecking Nvidia Renos! Oh no, my chips, they're all going down.
Yeah, that's like the favorite stock for everyone. I go on these trading apps. It's always Nvidia, right? They can do no wrong.
It really upset me because I knew this beforehand, because I looked at like my I have some money in like mutual funds, etc. And you can look at like what's the how many percentage do they put in like which companies, and it's like you put like half my money in Nvidia. Like, stop, you have to diversify. And then this happens and my funds like dip by like 30%. Is like, you retards. Anyway, the Nikkei shed at 1%, tech stocks 3.25. All right. Anyway, Daniel Morgan, senior portfolio manager in Synovus Trust Company in Atlanta, says bear in mind that DeepSeek's AI assistant is focused on mobile phones, PCs, and laptop devices, not the massive data center services that the hyperscalers provide. That's true. I mean, you could, for those of you in the know, you could in theory run like DeepSeek on a Raspberry Pi or something small. Amazon's AWS, Microsoft Azure, Alphabet's Google Cloud Platform. So I see a very small threat here. The real money in AI is providing the chips for the data centers for the likes of NVIDIA, AMD, and what is Avago again? I forget. Let me double check. It's not working. Here we go. It's Broadcom. There it is. I can see some threat from DeepSeek AI's model to Microsoft's ChatGPT, Meta and Alphabet's Gemini, but not to the data centers. Overall, I view AI tech sell-off today as an opportunity to add high-quality tech shares on weakness. Let's see here. David Wagner, head of equities, Aptus Capital Advisors LLC, Fairhope, Alabama, says, I think that everyone in the market loves to hate on the US concentration of the top 10 stocks. Yeah, I just did it. But these stocks are the exact reason that we hit all-time highs last week. Some may see it as a risk, as I see it as an opportunity, because these mega cap companies exhibit operating leverage, which can continue to drive operating margin expansion. No matter how you slice it, the US market is dependent on these stocks, but that's not always a bad thing. Does this undermine valuations broadly in US equities? When a narrative is driving the market, there may be increased volatility until we see tangible results from an ROIC perspective on the AI spend. This does not mean that the narrative has been disproven, and I think that this is a buying opportunity as US stocks still yield the largest amount of growth with the lowest regulations throughout the entire world. The problem with, that's the fun thing about like economists and finance stuff, is that, you can talk a lot, but you're not really getting an answer, because this guy is either going to be like a genius or he's going to be a retard, depending on whether or not this is a bubble, and you won't know until after the fact, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the DeepSeek thing, it wasn't just, okay, here's an innovation that comes out of China, but there was also a propaganda push on it when I was especially browsing social media around it. And it faded pretty quickly, but there was just a lot of sort of Chinese account, a Chinese adjacent account pushing this kind of stuff. They had some memes, they had some other things, and then you get the commentators like, I talk about this a lot on Twitter. They're kicking our ass meme. But that's what they always bring out. Like, you need to whip up the American slaves a little bit more. It's like China's kicking our ass. Why are you not working 80-hour work weeks? Because they're gonna beat us in. Well, it's the AI race now, right?
Vingle says he's quoting, "Wait, you guys aren't 100% stoked about Trump and the transhumanist tech boys, bro? Why are you blackbrailing, bro?" Yeah, dude, it's about the vibes, right? The vibes are shifting, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm blackpilling about other things, but it's not really the transhumanism stuff. But I mean,
it's not the transhumanism.
Just what I found interesting about it is really like China as kind of a rival to the United States, and what they say about China. Because I've been trying to parse China a little bit more, and because I've been focusing a lot on Russia, and I'm trying to use like the Russian lens to try to understand China. And what I've understood about China is that there's really not that much to understand. Chinese propaganda is like kindergarten level, basically, when compared to the stuff that Russia has. And what they're saying about China and the fact that they lack creativity, this is just true. I've just accepted this as a fact. I mean, I didn't believe this in the beginning, but like their propaganda, like their branding of themselves, is just absolute shit. The only thing they're able to do is stuff like this. They copied ChatGPT. It seems like they've used ChatGPT to train a cheaper version of ChatGPT.
I know there was stuff going around, right? That if you prompt DeepSeek, it gives you like the terms of service of OpenAI.
Yeah, yes, and because what people were commenting,
which is the most Chinese thing ever, by the way.
Yeah. Is that you're getting?
It's like, yeah, the steel is very good. We'll give it to you for cheap, and then you get it, and it's like half grade, right?
It's a similar product for cheaper. That's a copy, and of course, because people are commenting on, like, they're trying to prod DeepSeek about these kind of like taboo questions. Like, okay, you ask it about Tibet, for example, or Taiwan, or Tiananmen Square, or something. And it's programmed to just basically not answer, or to shut you out of the system. Like, it might close. For some people, I saw that their accounts were closed out because they were prodding too much. But this is just pointing to me like how, like, this is essentially like the Chinese propaganda approach is erasure, right? Russia does revisionism, China does erasure, and it's, I mean, but it's like such a lame, kind of ineffective approach that when you approach them about a sensitive topic, and they just say, no, we're not talking about that. But this always becomes like an admission of guilt, right? You say, okay, well, what happened at Tiananmen Square? Well, we're not going to talk about it. Well, then something happened. It's like, if you ask like someone, say like Sergei Lavrov or something, some Russian diplomat, about like what happened here, like what happened in Crimea in 2014 or something, what happened to Alexander Navalny or something, like they'll have 10 different revisionist stories about what happened involving so many different players. It's like a postmodern novel that people are just getting lost in. And people just walk around believing all sorts of weird things based on these different information leaks that they're putting all over the place. But with China, it's like, no, it didn't happen. Just shut up. And this is consistently their approach as well. Like, I mean, I had some people talking about like, well, China's not really that serious about it, but they are. I mean, if you remember things like from the 2000s, like Chinese interference into American cinema, for example, like the in the Marvel movie, I think it's Doctor Strange, where they had they had to change one of these characters. That's like the mentor Tibetan monk character that's supposed to teach Doctor Strange how to do these the finger movements and all this kind of like Eastern esoteric magic arts. And it was changed to a white woman, right? And people were thinking along the lines like, this is a woke thing. But it was actually China pressuring American studios to not have a Tibetan character in there, because their policy towards Tibet is basically erasure. Like it's Tibet is not a thing, Taiwan is not a thing, and whatever they don't want to talk about is just closed out. They okay, we just don't talk about that. And the kind of whatever narrative that they have is just completely chucked. It's like a century of humiliation, for example. It's we were chucked by the West for like 100 years. We were forced to do opium. We're just like they chucked us for 100 years, and we're very humiliated by it. And now we're like trying to flex. Essentially, like that's like their mythos with their people. It's just incredibly gay. I mean, China is serious. It's just not very.
Cybernino says Trotsky got erased from the picture. That's literally revisionism, though, because the picture still exists, right? That's the difference.
Yeah, but of course you have to realize that like Soviet propaganda and Russian Federation propaganda is different.
Yeah, that might be true too.
They have traces of the same thing, but it's like the Soviet stuff is more kind of like alt reality propaganda, whereas like the newer stuff, the Sukov, what is his name, the one who's in the Adam Curtis movies, Vladislav Surkov. This is like, it's like postmodern, post-truth style propaganda. It's kind of like Firehood of Falsehood stuff. That's what they're running now, but it's just like 100 times more creative than anything that China could do, which is, I mean, it's weird. It's just really weird to me that China can't do anything more creative with all of their resources and all their IQ and all their stuff than just copying Western stuff. But I guess it's just like that. It's just not that much to think about. I'm sorry for the digression.
Brent Taylor writes the copium wars. Okay, let's see here. Ordanon says it's illegal to reincarnate in China without the permission from the CCP. This law was implemented just to mess with Tibet. Apparently.
Perfect.
That sounds like a very China thing to do. Yep. All right. DeepSeek's R1. This is Shams Afzal, Managing Director, Carnegie Investment Council in Toledo. DeepSeek's R1 emergence has shown that necessity is still the mother of invention. The fractional compute intensity at DeepSeek compared to US counterparts is a result of some breakthroughs that would likely not have happened if the engineers had 80 billion of discretionary capex at their disposal, or capex. As LLM scholars and practitioners dissect DeepSeek's papers, here is what we know so far. Quote, DeepSeek's model does not fire on all cylinders at all times, but rather gets activated at different phases of the total compute cycle. It predicts which part of the model would need to activate and thus keeps the computational workload at a minimum. This is called something like an expert model or something, where you like designate nodes in the network as like, you're very good at math or you're very good at this and that. And so if you ask, if it manages to sort of head you off and decide that you're actually not asking a math question, it doesn't have to fire on like all the math stuff. That's how they save a lot of computation. This is quite different than Meta's, Google's, and OpenAI's LLMs that are on full tilt from the start. The reserved computational output is made possible by one of their major breakthroughs, the KV cache compression, meaning that their engineers have been able to extract higher levels of throughput in memory-constrained applications. This is primarily why DeepSeek's inference costs are much lower. This has implications on the existing sanctions on high-end NVIDIA chips and the significant capex targets by the Mag 7 names, especially Meta, Microsoft, and Google. In the near term, this will negatively affect NVIDIA's valuation, especially if the lower-priced H800 chips may end up being potent enough for many AI applications. It does not appear that DeepSeek circumvented the export restrictions based on an early assessment that the H800 and not the latest H100 chips were used to train the models. The question for national security expert would be if NVIDIA was right to have been allowed to modify the chips for export purposes. The redevelopment hurts lofty valuations of chip companies in the short term, and it likely hurts data center rights long term if the final assessment is less demand, or REITs. The final assessment is less demand for high-intensity compute. The downstream effects will be seen in lowering expectations for power equipment players like Eaton, cooling solution providers like Vertiv, and other verticals in the data center space. Ultimately, if AI is positive for humanity, breakthroughs like this cache compression and predictive computational power deployment are net benefits to the overall endeavor. How this changes the over 225 billion CapEx targets announced by half a dozen megatech names remains to be seen. So this guy is a bit more positive than the previous guy because, the first one? One of these guys were like, well, what matters is the data centers. And this guy is saying, well, actually, you have to be skeptical about the people who provide the data centers because they might be in hot water if this continues. Let's see here. The significance of the DeepSeek's news seems to be very powerful, seems to be cost-effective, and if that's proved right over the fullness of time, that challenges the investment thesis of paying very high multiples for big tech for that AI dominance and AI growth. The share price move today is a reflection of very high expectations built into those stocks. It's highly significant as potential valuations and expectations reset. However, I wouldn't push it too much. There's more to the big tech stocks than just AI, even though it's a significant portion of the story. I mean, Nvidia has been going quite hard on the AI lately. So specifically for them, it's a big one. I mean, you have to, what is it now? You can like turn on AI mode and you can run like Cyberpunk at like 400 frames per second. That's very important. We have to be able to do that. We can't just make better games. We have to fix it with AI. Let's see here. Chinese equities is the second biggest equity market and one of the cheapest equity markets in the world. This news shines a broader light on the tech prowess within China. We may begin to see investors revisiting Chinese stocks. Well, that's the thing, though. As you said, any investor or any long-term businessman I've heard talk about China sort of off the record always say that the Chinese are the worst. Right, as you were saying, like they deliver shit stuff. It's always copies, etc., etc.
And I think there's
there's going to have to a lot of stuff is going to have to change for China to be able to sort of climb that mountain, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there's limitations, especially if you're a foreign investor trying to invest in the Chinese market. I don't know if that's changed, but I think it's a lot more closed. It's harder to get money in and out of it, and I'm no expert. I just have that impression that if you are a foreign investor trying to invest in Chinese stocks, there's sort of limits to the information that you can get. It's limits to how much you can buy of these certain companies and so on. But I do see like some hedge funds that are trying to kind of hedge globally, but buying Chinese equities.
Sure.
But again, I don't know if I mean, you can't call China a bubble because they are sort of emerging power and they are in some sense undervalued because of their currency. But at the same time,
I wouldn't call China in general a bubble. I would just say that if they're hard to trust and hard to do business with,
not that impressed with them, right? They in general, but I don't know. I don't know if we need to read through the rest of it.
No, it's just going to get more markety, I guess. Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
We have USAID, right?
Yeah, I found another article that I think is better than the Reuters one.
And it's not necessarily supposed to be a US focused, thing, but it actually has a lot of implications for stuff in Europe as well, because it seems like, USAID is pushing a lot of money into various NGOs in Europe, and Musk and his boys are rolling in. From the New York Post, USAID staffers told to stay out of DC headquarters after Musk said Trump agreed to shut it down. Quote, just a ball of worms. USAID workers received an email Monday telling them to stay out of the agency's DC headquarters as Elon Musk and the White House moved in to, quote, shut it down and reorganize it under the State Department. Staffers with the U.S. Agency for International Development were ordered to, quote, at the direction of agency leadership to work remotely, except for personnel with essential on-site and building maintenance functions individually contracted by senior leadership. Further guidance will be forthcoming, the missive said. Here's Donald Trump protecting Elon Musk from a small child, it seems. What is this photo? The email appeared to have been drafted by Gavin Kliger, an engineer in Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which has been charged with trimming federal spending from their agency's roughly $40 billion budget, as well as other executive branch departments. The U.S. Is the largest funder of foreign aid internationally, including through the USAID, and the Republicans have routinely slammed the agency's work, particularly for having been wasteful of taxpayers' money and unnecessarily promoting a left-wing agenda abroad, like Northern says $500,000 on expanding atheism in Nepal. This is the kind of thing Norway does as well. We do a lot of these weird shit, like dance classes in South Africa, right?
I mean, I told you this, but this is like the wet dream of all of these Norwegian Bitcoin populists on Twitter, right? I think that's why they want to become American citizens, right? Because a lot of the Norwegian.
But we can do this without becoming American citizens. Am I radical for saying that?
Yeah, I just don't think they have belief in anybody but Elon. So, but you have these people who are actually getting a reach into the mainstream from the Norwegian libertarian community, and the way that they're doing it is that they're, we've shown this on the show before. Like they'll have these compilations of things that they track from like the Norwegian charities that or what Norwegian grants to art projects, or like these various weird things like that they spend on these avant-garde art classes and stage shows and all this stuff, that it's all like this kind of total wacko things, and they explain how much money was used on it and how wasteful it is. And now Elon has just sort of gone in here and kind of taken the whole thing apart, and they're just going to defund all of it. Right? I mean, it is big in terms, because the American economy is big. Like it has a $40 billion budget annually, but as a percentage of the American GDP, it's actually not that big. It's probably like 0.1.
Yeah, Norway scores a lot higher on aid per capita. Actually,
yeah. I mean, we're at like 1% of GDP, and we have a sovereign wealth fund. So in terms of like the total amount that we're using on aid, it's actually a lot higher than the United States.
Did James Lindsay get USAID money? Is that true?
He didn't. No, they're just lying.
Okay.
They're a lot of people are just creaming their pants on Twitter about this, essentially, and they're just like, everybody they don't like, they claim get some kind of aid money, and they think this is a lot more significant than it actually is. Which
if you don't donate to the Longhouse right now with the super chat, you are getting USAID money. That's going to be my stance. And
you have to donate,
especially, and actually, if you are getting USAID money, you're going to have to donate to us now with those money. So either way, you should donate with the super chat to the Longhouse. Thank you very much.
I think a lot of the misunderstandings with people who show up there, like there are people who have charitable organizations, who have foundations and stuff. I think the foundation that Richard Hanania has, it showed up in the database, right? And that's the evidence that they have, is that they you search the database and it shows up there, but there's no record of him receiving any money, right? So that's usually like the.
So it could be that they have actually petitioned for money, but they haven't gotten any, right?
Well, yeah, or maybe they just have that, right? Because it's a huge database of like trying to track all these foundations in the United States. So they just they know they exist. They might maybe have to register somewhere, and they just pull from some other data source, which is likely, but. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff is ridiculous, but some of the stuff, like, they're getting a little bit too excited about the revelations here, and like a lot of them are acting like they've never heard about NGOs before, or essentially how they work. But yeah, you can keep reading the article, and we'll circle back into it.
Last month, House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Brian Mast called out several controversial DEI expenditures, which ended up being halted by a 90-day foreign funding pause imposed after Trump took office. For example, Mast faulted the Biden administration for approving $1.5 million US in funding for employment and entrepreneurial opportunities to the Serbian pro-LGBT Grupa Izađi, which translates to Group Come Out. The Foreign Affairs Committee chairman also slammed other USAID grants, including $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam and $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, and $32,000 for the production of a Peruvian transgender comic book. The Daily Mail. I mean, when you list it like this, it sounds insane.
Well, yeah, but
and
this
I mean,
is like
it's the juicy stuff, right? But the questionable funding wasn't. Sorry, what?
Yeah, this is the waste populism that I was talking about, right? You show off these kind of the more kind of fringe, insane parts of the stuff, and it's very good both for slop content and just to generate populist energy towards the government. But like if you have out of like 40 billion, like,
Bill Wilson says, "Wait until they learn about Israel." Yeah, they're gonna build like Disneyland in Gaza now. Yeah,
I mean, $32,000 is like kind of like just like a drop in the bucket of this money, even though it goes to sort of really silly stuff like they have to divide.
Apparently, they gave a lot to the BBC, but what also came out in this, which I didn't know, is that the Swedes, for some reason, give a lot of money to the BBC as well. Like the news.
I mean, we don't have the pie chart here, but the people who are funding the BBC, Sweden funds it, Switzerland funds it, the EU funds it. There's like
a lot of people fund it, but the Swedes fund the BBC a suspiciously large amount. That's all.
But I mean, this is also something like they're acting like it's like the first time they've seen that they're funding organizations that they think are useful for them, or you have a certain budget that you need to use, and you try to spend it smartly. Just like it's not an investment. In terms of like you're getting back a yield of like 10%, but it's an investment in terms of like, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. But I mean, you think about this in terms of soft power, right? Which organizations do I think was going to further my values in what country? Do I think the British Broadcasting Central, is it like a net positive for my worldview or something? Do I think that they're more useful or more harmful? And if I think they're useful, then it's good for me to keep them going.
Of course.
Essentially, but that's the way it is with a lot of these organizations. They're just running on charities, like say like the WHO or the World Trade Organization, or a lot of these more global organizations. They're just running on member contributions, right? They're not making any money. It's really just about the cultural influence and the idea of like the net benefit that they have, at least perceived by the people who are paying the money. So it's like these people are acting like it's some kind of like oh we got them now, it's a CIA, or like funding the BBC. It's I'm sorry to say, but it's just like people on the right, they don't understand. I think they've proven this beyond a shadow of a doubt, that like people who are in this kind of populist camp, they don't understand the concept of soft power. They're like if you say the word, I think they have an idea, but they don't actually understand what it is or how it's applied or how it works. And you're seeing
or why it should be a strategy or like a tactic.
What you're getting out of it or how it works. So they don't understand the difference between having soft power and not having it, in a sense. And the way they're commenting about Trump's actions in government, it's very clear that they don't understand how that works or why it's harmful to do certain things or not harmful to do other things. But yeah.
But now Doge is going to take over, and when inevitably that ends, we're going to get some Chuddite in, and he's going to spend all the USAID money to make sure that you all get a girlfriend. That's going to be the policy.
American Iron Dome, or it goes to Benjamin Netanyahu's personal account or something.
Seamus O'Blaine says, got funding for trans leprechauns. Here's your cut. Thank you so much for the £2. No, is it euros? It's euros.
Yeah, it's a small amount for us, but a big amount for trans.
I sometimes mix up the sign for euros and pounds. I don't know why. Nordanon says, I'm reminded about something Morgoth said on Jay Burden's show. Once populists talk about something, it gets tainted by association and becomes cringe. Therefore, the rest of us can't talk about it. In a sense, yeah. Let's see here. The questionable funding was on top of the millions of dollars doled out to Chinese research labs in Wuhan, where the virus causing COVID-19 emerged more than 5 years ago. Oh, is that canon now? I thought that wasn't canon. It's good to know. Millions more in funding was sent for relief to the Gaza Strip, even while being marked at, quote, high risk of falling into the hands of Hamas terrorists by the agency's own watchdog. That's interesting. So the US is funding both Israel and Gaza. That's real empire shit there, to be fair. Right?
Well, I mean, Gaza or Palestine is really like one of the biggest recipients of foreign aid out of like any country, because a lot of people support it. Even people who are giving money to Israel are also giving money to Gaza for humanitarian aid.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, they do subsist mainly. That's all Palestine is. It's just like a sort of foreign aid factory in a sense. I'm not trying to like disparage them or anything, but if you just look at the amount they're receiving, it's pretty nuts. But yeah, Trump had this comment about like what condoms for Gaza or something. $50 million for condoms to Gaza. I mean, it's apparently they're not using them. They have like a fertility rate of 8 kids or something per woman. So
yeah,
I don't know where those condoms
it doesn't
go.
work.
Just, like, blowing them up as balloons or whatever.
Yeah, unless that is sort of that's the play. Like they're giving it's actually like a strategic play by Israel to have US send a bunch of condoms to Gaza.
What's the problem then? I mean, that's kind of the kind of double-edged sword here when you're talking about the Palestinians are using fertility as a kind of tactical, hybrid warfare angle by outbreeding the Israelis over time. And so they're sending them condoms. They're sort of teaching them about contraceptives and stuff. And if that actually has an effect, and if that can sort of tilt it in Israel's favor, then that's actually a net good. But this is also something that it's kind of over the head of a lot of MAGA in a sense. So
yeah. Okay, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters Monday afternoon that the agency had a, quote, level of insubordination that makes it possible to conduct a sort of mature and serious review that I think foreign aid writ large should have. He also relieved in a letter to congressional lawmakers that Foreign Assistance Director Peter Marocco would serve as Deputy Administrator of USAID to, quote, review and reorganize the agency into the State Department. Trump 78 told reporters Sunday night, why would you say his age like that? Trump 78 told reporters Sunday night that the USAID had been run by a bunch of radical lunatics and were getting them out. Musk said hours later on an X Spaces event that the president had, quote, agreed with the billionaire Tesla and SpaceX founder that we should shut it down. It became apparent that it's not an apple with a worm, Musk told listeners on the live stream Monday. What we have is just a ball of worms. You've got basically to get rid of the whole thing. It's beyond repair. I can understand that, if you want to change it, right, and not just get rid of it, sometimes the best way to do it is to just start over, right? To give him the benefit of the doubt. It might be that the Trump regime would be pro-USAID, but only for things that they care about, right?
Yeah, I think so too. But again, I think a lot of the people who are coming into this admin just don't understand how exactly, giving people money, what do you mean? It's like, you're stupid if you give people money, right? That's kind of, you're losing. You're not winning, right? If you're giving away money for free, you're not asking for anything in return.
Sure. The largest share of USAID's $43.4 billion budget in fiscal year 2023 went toward foreign governance, blah, blah, blah. The top 10 of the 130 or so nations that received U.S. taxpayer funds that year were Ukraine, Ethiopia, Jordan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Syria. Trump's funding freeze on foreign assistance has since shut down many of USAID's aid programs worldwide, compelling thousands of layoffs by non-governmental groups. But the agency's near closure has also barred access to security apps critical for some agency staff abroad in conflict zones. Other websites have popped up tracking the thousands of job losses associated with the stop work order imposed by the Trump administration last week, as well as an interactive map showing which nations will be adversely affected.
Can we see the map? Is the link open?
I can bring up the map, yeah. No. It says that you can't find the page.
Maybe it's on there, like they shut down the entire website before.
Yeah, it seems to have been shut down.
Before we read the article, yeah.
Yeah.
What about the job losses thing? Is that available?
Yep. I can bring that up. One moment. They are estimating 5,000 estimated American jobs lost, 100,000 plus estimated global jobs lost, 10,000 confirmed American jobs lost, 15,000 plus confirmed global jobs lost. And which states is highlighted in yellow. It's pretty much
Yeah,
the entire country, except for like Minnesota or something.
So this is like a hostile takeover of a government, right? This is typical. I mean, if you worked for an American company, this is just how you get fired. You don't. There's no like notice period or anything. You just just take your stuff and walk out.
Just leave. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the article. Congressional Democrats held a press conference outside USAID's headquarters Monday, protesting alongside other critics that the shuttering of the agency was unconstitutional. Everything is unconstitutional because the Constitution is too vague, I think. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like, claimed far-left Squad Representative Ilhan Omar. What Trump and Elon and all of their cronies are trying to do is take away the constitutional power of Congress. Musk and Doge cost cutters had apparently butted heads in person with USAID officials over the weekend. 2 USAID security officials were placed on leave Saturday after refusing to let the Doge team access classified material in restricted areas at the agency's headquarters in the Ronald Reagan building near the White House. The agency's chief of staff, it's really funny if the USAID building is the Ronald Reagan building, by the way. That's like, it kind of writes itself, right? The agency's chief of staff, Matt Hobson, who had just been appointed by the second Trump administration, subsequently resigned, though it is unclear if his departure was in response to the apparently unlawful incident. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy created USAID by an executive order to provide humanitarian, developmental, and security assistance, prompting some critics of the agency to point out Trump could simply revoke it. Yeah, I was going to say, can't you just revoke it then? And then this has nothing to do with the Constitution then. If it's an executive order, you can just revoke the order and shut down the department.
Yeah, I guess that's what he did as well. So
I'm so it's not unconstitutional because
constitutional qualifications are exactly how that works. You're gonna have to ask a lawyer about this, but it seems pretty straightforward that you can in fact just revoke the humanitarian aid if you want to.
It's just a bunch of like, it's Elon and is like a bunch of like broccoli-headed Zoomers rolling in like, please ma'am, put the foreign aid in the bag.
I made this comment on Twitter as well, but I mean, if this is like, it for me, it sort of dispels the myth of the kind of like the X-Files CIA. If they could, you could basically just walk in there and get access to classified information and just lock people out of their systems, and they can't do anything.
Yeah, you can apparently just do things, right?
Yeah, you can just they can just go in there and lock those employees out and like, hey, you can't go in there. That's classified information. No, actually, we're just walking in. I mean, American intelligence.
Paul says not to defend what the USAID funds were spent on, but I wonder what would be left of US soft power when they're done wrecking all this stuff. Well, that was something that Luddy Pat was saying earlier, is that soft power is a tactic, right? It is a tool. And you can disagree with the ideology behind, the usage, but it's still the tool, and removing the tool might actually do more harm than repurposing it.
No, I mean it's completely gutted already. Actually, it took like 2 weeks to all of the soft power that they built up over the years. It's just been completely gutted in the period of a few weeks. The only thing I'm interested in if it's how long it's going to take, or if the United States will even try to rebuild that when Trump is gone. That's the only thing I'm.
But what will that look like? I mean, it would mean that the U.S. would have to basically fund a bunch of like populists. Let's say USAID then starts giving a bunch of money to like AFD, and then once AFD is in power, they start giving money to like child birth, like fertility programs in Germany, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like start basically doing right-wing ideology, right-wing populism equivalents.
It's not just about giving people money. You have to actually make people like you. It's kind of the trick. You make people think that what you're doing is admirable and replicable. And of course, you could do something like you could do something with fertility, I guess. But generally, the way things have gone, it's like the soft power is just blown out completely. I don't know what to say. They'll have to figure that one out. I don't know how long you can bully other countries into doing what you like or run fake threats.
I mean, I can't help but be happy that some of the things they're stopping money on is stuff that I don't like that's happening to my country. So I'm a bit torn, like either way here.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean, but I think that there's going to be a blowback effect here. I feel like they're setting up this government to be as vindictive as possible, right? I mean, this is not like 5D chess. This is just sort of emotional catharsis for the people involved, and
it's just revenge. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's just kind of revenge. They're just creating revenge porn for themselves with this stuff. And I mean, let's say like you have like 50,000 people, like 100,000 people who are unemployed. What do you think those people are going to do, right? You think they're just going to sit on their ass and do nothing? There's like, okay, you have like 100, like what was it, 50,000 or something, 50,000 activists who don't have a job anymore, and they know they don't have a job. It wasn't something like they
and this isn't like when you shut down a factory, right? And like, oh, what am I going to do now? These people's jobs were basically to be as activists, right?
They were full-time activists, and it's not like, well, okay, we have to cut costs and we have to reprioritize and we can try to find you another job or something. This is like very explicitly done as an act of spite towards those people. It was made very clear that they think it's like a can of worms or something, and what they're doing is complete trash. And now you don't have a job and you don't get a notice period or something. You're just locked out.
The thing is, I mean, if they're prepared to handle that, it's fine, right? I just don't know if Doge is prepared to handle that.
Well, what do you mean by
I think Doge is just navigating on vibes, honestly.
Well, I thought the purpose was to sort of just defund it. The problem is that, okay, the activist class is going to, they're just sort of freed up now to do whatever, right? Well, to do activism, quite frankly, which is what they do. And I mean, you have, of course, these examples of like the silly humanitarian aid stuff. That's like the transgender symphony in Colombia or whatever. But there's also the humanitarian aid that is just like, medicines or food or stuff like that. And it's being cut abruptly. It's like, okay, well, what did Trump say? Okay, we're going to freeze it and then think about what we're going to do about it. It's like a person who's on who's hooked up to a heart machine or something. It's like, yeah, well, I'm going to pause the heart machine and think about think about what I'm going to do if I'm going to turn it back on again. I mean, a lot of people are just going to die, like flat out, because of this. And so there is a sort of not just the kind of spitefulness in the way that they did it, but also like these people are going to have a lot of motivation and time to just sit and spend and like work against the government. You're just creating a bunch of friction there that didn't need to be there. It's just kind of my consider. That was the first thing I thought about when I heard this. Is like these people are well, they're basically just going to spend all of their time trying to work against the Trump government with the resources that they have, and I think they're going to find other donors to do this eventually. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, when you don't understand soft power, it's just this is what you get. You just create a bunch of friction everywhere.
Well, I mean, I don't mind that if you're prepared to deal with the consequences. So I hope they are, because it's good for me if they are, like in like a personal sense. For the country long term, I'm not quite sure. My country, I mean. As I said, I'm a bit torn. Like half of me is happy that a lot of bullshit stuff is disappearing. The other half of me feels that the revenge that's going to probably come in 4 years' time is going to be even stronger than this is.
I don't know exactly how this is going to look, but I feel like they've sort of set themselves up for multiple kind of revenge scenarios already. I mean, one of the things is that you sort of disenfranchise. You put a lot of people who were standing inside the tent. You put them outside of the tent. Like it's better to have them inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. And now there's a lot of people that are going to be outside of the tent, pissing in. constantly, and currently they seem completely cucked. But that remains to be seen in, say, 2 years, 4 years, what exactly is going to happen. And the other thing is that I guess by running the government the way that they're doing, and by just kind of dismantling the bureaucracy, but dismantling kind of all of the branches of it, assuming they're going to go that far, you're making it easier for other people to kind of just. I mean, I was speculating on, say, whether they would be, whether you would get like a coup, and have the United States run by a military junta eventually. If you say, let's say, you actually do the Doge thing. And we're just we cut out the entire government, right? The blob or whatever. It's just the executive branch and the courts or something. Then it's going to be very easy for let's say like the military to just coup the government, because there's really nothing there. Okay, well, who actually has the power then? If you're kind of like an autarkic, isolated country who nobody likes. And the government structure is relatively simple, then it's the people who have the most guns, who are the most comfortable with conflict, that are just going to take over.
You're going to just create like a real like a tear down of
the Biden junta that they talked about, the conservative media. It's going to be the real Biden junta.
Well, hey, maybe the South will rise, yeah. And
they might. I mean, I just don't.
What's
see
this
that.
like? There's this mod for. Is it Crusader Kings or Europa Universalis or Hearts of Iron, where you play a version of the Americas which is fractured in the sense, and you have all these like weird, like very specific, like this part is run by like a super Christian version of Teddy Roosevelt or something, like some super strange alternate history stuff. Hearts of Iron for Fire Rising, okay, yeah. So maybe you'll get something like that.
Yeah, nothing is off the table. Something definitely happened.
Jules Roy says, "Don't fight back. Your enemies will want revenge." No, I think you should just consider that your actions have consequences and be prepared to deal with those consequences. Because if you just think one step ahead against an entrenched enemy, you're just going to hit a line of machine gun fire and you're going to lose your offensive, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between like fighting back and then just basically rubbing shit in your enemy's face until they. I mean, I don't know if you've seen many revenge films or sort of. I've actually dealt with any administrative tasks ever, but just in my own experience, like the cost of like rubbing shit in people's face. I'm meaning it as a metaphor, but like trying to do this kind of stuff is like. I mean, let's say we talked about postal, right? And the concept of like the postal shooter, these people who come into the workplace and just like shoot the workplace up. they didn't do this because they were treated well. They do this basically because they feel like they've been snubbed in some way. And but of course, I mean, if you don't understand soft power, you don't understand it, right? That's just when you get comments like this, is like, oh well. We have to just rub their face in shit or whatever.
Keep attacking.
I mean, of course they don't understand the concept, and they just there's no point in trying to even explain it. But
chutzpah is usually not worth the effort for the squeeze, says Ultra Radical Sense as well. Some people can do the chutzpah and other people can't. So, all right, we have gone a bit over time. And I think it's time we end the stream for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We will, of course, be back next week. I don't plan on becoming sick anytime soon again. And I don't think we have any specific plan for then. I have some stuff in the works. But you can find me, of course, on Twitter or X, sorry. A Walrus or at Walrus in a Suit. You can find Luddic Path, which I believe is just at Luddic Path as well. And anything else we need to talk about before we leave?
No, I think we did a good episode. So yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you all next week. Bye bye.